At some point in your life, grief is going to come for you. Some of you are in it right now. Some of you are passing through a season of grief, and some can see it on the horizon. And his grief is, men that I love died in battle. That's his grief. When grief comes, you've got to process your grief. And you've got to process it with the Lord, and you've got to get through it to a place of being healthy. Otherwise, what you're going to start doing is causing damage and harm to everyone, including yourself. He's got a lot of grief. Do you understand that? I mean, is there seasons where you're just kind of brokenhearted? And oftentimes the grief is around loss. Here it's the loss of family and friends. He's seen men that he loves just get killed by enemy combatants in a war situation. For some of you, the grief is that you were in love and now you're divorced. You started a company and then it went bankrupt. You had a good friend and then they betrayed you. You served in a ministry and then it failed you. We've all got grief. We've all got grief. And when grief comes, this is our opportunity to either bring it to the Lord and get better, or not bring it to the Lord and get bitter. He doesn't bring it to the Lord to get better, and he gets bitter. And what you're seeing here is bitter vengeance from a man who is not rightly processing his grief. Now, we already know that he's exhausted. He's just done. You're a human being, and there are going to be days when you just hit the limits of your humanity. You just don't have any more emotional, physical, mental, spiritual energy. And sometimes you will come to that point of exhaustion because of the approachment of grief. Say, I can't deal with this anymore. I can't process this anymore. I can't cry anymore. I can't push anymore. I'm just done. And so we can understand his grief and we can sympathize with his grief. Men that he cared about, his quote unquote brothers, died. They were killed in battle. But he doesn't respond in the healthiest of ways. First and foremost, they died in battle. Let me just say this. There's a difference between murder and death in combat. Murder is an innocent civilian. Death in combat is two soldiers go to war and they are taking the risk that one of them is not coming home. So this isn't exactly murder. In addition, his response is bitterness. And what he does as a result of his bitterness, he starts pillaging cities and towns in his own country. Anytime you are doing violence against your own nation, you've really got to question whether you're on the right side of the fight. People that are out looting and attacking and rioting and destroying cities, those are people that are disobeying God. That we should have conflict with our enemies, but we should seek for peace among our citizenry. In addition, he is now attacking fellow believers publicly. He's taking the elders of the city out and he's flogging them, the same thing that the Roman soldiers did to the Lord Jesus. Elders would mean older men in the culture who are regarded as spiritual authorities. Let me say this, you've really got to check your heart if what you're doing is attacking believers publicly. They call themselves ministries, they're counterfeit ministries. All they do is they just exist to attack Christians and leaders and cause divisions and factions and rumors and gossip and clickbait. And every once in a while, the Bible will have a shepherd naming a wolf to protect a sheep. But as a general rule, sheep don't get to go around attacking shepherds. And so what we see here is what Gideon is doing is not healthy behavior. He's exhausted, he has grief, he's bitter, he's not processed well, he's not forgiven from the heart. He is threatening publicly, he is attacking citizens, and he is causing damage to property. He's not doing well. Now, today, if the report was on the news, he would be a victim and we talk about his trauma and how we can excuse all of this. And let me say this, it doesn't matter what you've been through, your response is your responsibility. Even if you've been through hardship, pain, grief, and loss, even trauma, and he's in the middle of a war, your response is still your responsibility. And what he is doing, he is taking his grief and his pain, and he's causing pain and more grief. In addition, he then includes his son. And this to me is horrifying. His firstborn son, Jether. And here's what he tells his boy. So he gets the two enemies that he doesn't like, and now there's a number of witnesses present, and he looks at his little boy, and he says, and I quote, "Rise, kill them." Okay, see what he's doing? He's trying to put a generational curse on his son. See, there's something in a son that really wants to be like their father, true or false? Most children grow up assuming their father is a good man until there is sufficient evidence that would convince them otherwise. And there's something in every child, especially a son, that has a dad who's a leader or a believer. They want to see their father as a great man, and they want to be like their father. And here, Gideon's a man of God, but he's having a bad day. And he looks at his son, he says, "Take your sword out and slaughter those two grown men, those political leaders." And what it says is, he did not draw his sword. He was afraid because he was young. What if this boy would have done what his dad asked him to do? Number one, he would have a bounty on his head for the rest of his life. Like if a little boy slaughters a political leader from an enemy nation, you know there's going to be a bounty on his head for the rest of his life. In addition, this would have been a generational curse. He would have been bringing the bitterness that was in his father into his future. Let me say this. If your father has bitterness, don't allow your father's bitterness to go with you into your future. His father is bitter. He's not forgiving. And ultimately, the best thing that Gideon could have done, he could have stopped and worshiped God like he did in Judges 6 and 7. And he could have forgiven his enemies and let God deal with them. See, when you forgive someone, you're not letting them get away with anything. You're letting yourself get away from everything. And when you choose vengeance, what you're doing is you're taking a conflict that someone has with God and you're putting yourself in the middle. Stay out of it. Let God deal with them. Let me just ask you this question. Has God proven himself faithful to get vengeance on Gideon's enemies? He just killed 120,000 of them. Gideon at this point should say, you know what, God, you've proven yourself. You just killed 120,000 of our enemies. And I've got a few enemies in front of me, but you know what? I'm going to let you deal with them. And here's what he should have done. He should have grabbed his son and said, son, here's what forgiveness looks like. These are bad men, but we have a good God. And these men have done evil, but we're going to bless our enemies. And we're going to let God deal with them, son. Wait and see what our God does. He doesn't. Instead, what he says is, son, I'm bitter, be bitter, I want vengeance, execute vengeance. Take my bitterness and make it your generational curse. Let me say this, friends. When we're exhausted and grieving, sometimes we're capable of things that we don't think that we're capable of. And sometimes we include our family and our children and our legacy and our brokenness.
Howdy, Pastor Mark here. Thanks for viewing the clip. And if you'd like the entire sermon, we've got it ready to go.